Acts chapter 16 just started it. Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra. Talked about this before. Lystra, if I'd been Paul, Lystra would not have been my number one bucket list town to return to. He had been stoned there. But here, Luke, he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't allude to that at all. He doesn't point back to Paul's previous experience. He's pointing to something wholly different. Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived. Okay, a little more on Timothy, whose mother was Jewish and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. Now, the implication is that this was, I would call it a little bit of a religiously divided household, where Timothy's mom was a Jewish follower of Jesus. His dad was Greek. And Luke makes no real distinction at all about whether his dad, I guess I would say, had any particular faith. Now, if he was a normal Greek person, he would have had what we today think of as Greek mythology, which morphed a teeny bit to become Roman mythology. But I don't sense that Timothy's dad was anti-Jew or anti-Christian. He couldn't have been anti-Jew and married her. Now, this is me. I really wish I knew. I wish we could know. Was there a courtship here, or had this marriage been arranged? Because bear in mind, nearly every marriage in this day was an arranged marriage. How would it be that a Grecian man would have been arranged into a marriage of a Jewish woman? I don't know. Seems very interesting, though. There is, of course, the possibility that they married because they fell in love, and there was what I would categorize or characterize as some romance involved. But we don't know. Okay. We do know that Timothy's mother was a Jewish believer, and I think I can make a reasonable conjecture that his dad didn't get in the way of that, of his mom believing and pursuing her belief. Verse 2. The believers at Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him. Now, Timothy at this point was a young man. I don't think he was a teenager, but I think in Grecian culture, until you were 30 or so, you were a young person. Well, the believers at Lystra and Iconium spoke well of Timothy. Timothy had a reputation in these two towns. I wonder, we don't even know what was the basis of his reputation. Here's my thought. I think we gain a reputation because of a few things. On the negative, we gain a reputation because of our bad choices and our negative experiences, and how we have drawn others into the consequences of those things, right? Okay. But on the positive side, there's basically two things that have created this opinion, this reputation. And here it comes, and I know I simplify some things and I make other things so complicated. Thank you for being okay with that, or at least the grace on that. Here's what I see as the two reasons for a positive reputation. Because I have character and I behave out of that character, from within that character. People notice your character. How? By what you say. Well, somewhat. But much more by what you do, how you live your life. Is my behavior consistent with what I say are my values? I think Timothy, as a young man, and perhaps immature in some ways, he had this mark of maturity, that what he said were his values were given evidence by his behaviors. I think he was reliable. I think he at this point in time, Paul had not written the book of Galatians yet, but I think Timothy would have expressed in his life the fruit of the Spirit. Well, anyway, verse 3, Paul wanted to take him along on the journey, and this is very interesting. So he circumcised him because of the Jews who lived in that area, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. Stop the bus. I thought Paul had argued against this practice in Pisidian Antioch when these Jews had gone from Jerusalem to Antioch and were beginning to require Gentile believers to be circumcised and observe the Jewish law. And Paul said no. And here he's doing it. Poor Timothy. Whew. I don't want to be inappropriate here, but you do realize that just a couple of things. One, there was no such thing as anesthesia in these days. And a circumcision is a cutting of the flesh in a very significant, specific flesh. Yeah. Okay. Well, Luke gives a little bit of an explanation why Paul would have had this done. Actually, it's not, the implication is not that he, outsourced Timothy's circumcision, but that he performed it himself. Wow. Now, okay, I don't want to get stuck down in the weeds of circumcision, but we do have to look at the fact that Paul did not, he didn't forcibly do this to Timothy. Timothy submitted to it. I have trouble getting my brain wrapped around that, but it implies a few things. Number one, Timothy had such a high regard for Paul that he permitted Paul to do this very, I would call it, delicate surgery on him. And he, because Paul didn't force this, I think he would have said, this is necessary. And Timothy would have said, are you sure? To which Paul would have said, yes. Now, Timothy had a commitment here, right? It's not like, I'd love to travel with you guys. Sounds like a great idea. Circumcision? Whoa. No. I'm interested. But you're talking about, like stage 4 commitment here. I don't know. But I think he had that level of commitment. There is something not included here, and I'm not even sure what the meaning is of this, but what is not included in Luke's narrative of this event is that Paul was instructed by the Holy Spirit to circumcise Timothy. It's not there. Paul wanted to take Timothy along, this is verse 3, on the journey, so he circumcised him because of the Jews who lived in that area, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. Well, okay. On one hand, it almost makes sense that you wanted to make sure that these Jews realized that Timothy was fully committed to God. On the other, could it be that this was maybe Paul relying on his own sense of wisdom and moving forward? I'm not even saying that it was illegitimate. I'm just saying, well, was it necessary for Timothy to be circumcised? I look at it and think, I don't think so. But Paul thought it was. And since I wasn't in charge, Paul was. They did. Okay, verse 4. As they traveled from town to town, back up. It wasn't like on Thursday, Paul circumcised Timothy, and on Friday, they shoved off. No. I don't want to be inappropriate, but the truth is, that kind of surgery, you did not get over in a few hours. It would have taken days before it would have not been extremely painful for Timothy to even get up and move about. When his recovery, this is what I conjecture, when his recovery had been accomplished, they traveled from town to town. This is up in the area, the area of Derbe, Lystra, and Iconium. They delivered the decisions reached by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem for the people to obey. One of those decisions reached by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem was not that believers should be circumcised. I keep coming back to that and thinking, what? Well, it's obvious to me that Paul knew stuff that I won't ever know this side of heaven. What they were doing was they were going to the churches with the information that they had taken back with them to Antioch from the elders. Okay, verse 5. So the churches were strengthened in the faith and grew daily in numbers. Well, yeah, the message of that letter was very encouraging to a Gentile. I've talked about it. And the churches were strengthened in the faith. Now, there are two senses of that. One is their personal faith grew. Second is the faith. You have to look at the book of Jude, where Jude talks about the faith in terms of this body of faith that governs, sustains, encourages, supports, moves us forward in our walk with Christ. and they grew daily in numbers. Whew. Well, time's up. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.